In the next few minutes, I'm going to expose 10 Canadian bread brands hiding preservatives, synthetic additives, and ingredient shortcuts behind their familiar packaging and comforting promises. Plus, I'll reveal the 5 brands that actually deliver real bread without the chemical baggage. Stay until the end, because number 1 will change how you shop forever. Let's start with what's sitting in your kitchen right now. 10. Compliments. Starting at number 10, Compliments represents the store brand trap that many Canadians fall into without a second thought. This private label bread lines the shelves at Sobeys and Safeway, offering budget pricing that comes with hidden costs. The ingredient list reveals calcium propionate and sorbic acid, 2 preservatives working together to extend shelf life far beyond what fresh bread naturally achieves. The formula includes multiple dough conditioners and emulsifiers, specifically sodium stearoyl 2 lactylate and acetylated tartaric acid esters of mono and diglycerides. These chemicals modify dough texture and improve production efficiency, creating uniformity across millions of loaves. For older adults who remember when bread came from local bakeries with ingredients you could pronounce, this represents everything that changed in commercial baking. The added sugar sweetens the bread slightly, masking the flatness that heavy processing creates. What makes Compliments particularly concerning is its familiarity. Many Canadians reaching for store-brand products assume they're getting straightforward food, not realizing that private labels often match national brands in chemical complexity. The convenience of longer shelf life means your bread sits preserved by compounds that traditional bakers never needed. 9. No Name. At number 9, No Name's plain yellow packaging suggests simplicity, but the ingredient reality tells a different story. This Loblaws store brand has become a Canadian staple, recognized instantly by its minimalist design that implies no-frills honesty. The ingredient list includes calcium propionate, the same preservative extending shelf life beyond natural limits. The formula incorporates dough conditioners and emulsifiers, specifically sodium stearoyl lactate and vegetable monoglycerides, modifying how the dough behaves during industrial production. These additives create consistency across massive production runs, ensuring every loaf looks identical whether baked in Vancouver or Halifax. For many older Canadians, No Name represents budget-conscious shopping during retirement years. The irony is that this stripped-down branding hides the fact that the bread itself isn't stripped down at all. It contains the same synthetic additives found in premium brands, just without the marketing budget. The preservatives mean your bread can sit in the pantry for weeks without molding, a convenience that comes from chemistry rather than quality ingredients. 8. McGavin's. Moving to number 8, McGavin's carries West Coast heritage that many British Columbians remember fondly from childhood. This brand has been part of Vancouver's food landscape for generations, creating emotional connections that make ingredient scrutiny feel almost disloyal. The formula includes sugar and glucose fructose, sweeteners that appear throughout processed foods but have no place in traditional bread recipes. These added sugars create a slightly sweet taste that modern palates have been trained to expect. The ingredient list shows enriched wheat flour, meaning the milling process stripped away natural nutrients that were then added back synthetically. McGavin's includes emulsifiers and dough conditioners, specifically vegetable monoglycerides, that modify texture and extend freshness through chemical intervention. For older adults managing blood sugar or trying to reduce processed food intake, these additions matter more than they might have decades ago. The brand's regional familiarity creates trust, but that trust shouldn't extend to assuming the bread matches the quality standards of earlier generations. What grandparents knew as McGavin's bread bore little resemblance to today's formula, even if the name and packaging evoke the same warm feelings. 7. Bon Matin. At number 7, Bon Matin translates to good morning in French, promising a wholesome start that the ingredient list doesn't deliver. This brand appears in Costco and other retailers, often in larger packages that seem economical for families. The rye bread variety includes calcium propionate and sorbic acid, the preservative combination that appears repeatedly in commercial breads. These compounds prevent spoilage by inhibiting mold and bacterial growth, extending shelf life from days to weeks. The formula uses enriched wheat flour and added sugar, the same pattern of stripping and sweetening found across industrial baking. Bon Matin includes soy lecithin, an emulsifier derived from soybeans that improves dough handling during manufacturing. For older Canadians, particularly those who grew up with European bread traditions, this represents a significant departure from what rye bread should be. Traditional rye relied on sourdough starters and thyme, creating bread with character and nutritional density. Modern commercial rye speeds up the process through additives and enzymes, creating products that look like traditional bread but lack the depth. The larger package sizes encourage consumption over longer periods, which is only possible because of the preservatives preventing natural spoilage. 6. Gouda. Claiming number 6, Gouda represents Quebec heritage that many Francophones grew up with, creating brand loyalty spanning generations. This bread appears in Walmart and other major retailers across Canada, particularly strong in Quebec markets. The ingredient list shows enriched wheat flour, that same cycle of stripping nutrients during processing and adding them back synthetically afterward. Gouda includes added sugar, sweetening bread that traditional recipes never required. European bakers created magnificent bread for centuries using just flour, water, salt, and thyme. The formula contains wheat gluten, a protein concentrate added to improve dough strength and texture during mechanical processing. While gluten occurs naturally in wheat, adding concentrated gluten indicates dough that needs reinforcement to withstand industrial handling. For older adults, particularly those noticing that modern bread seems different from childhood memories, this concentration matters. The brand's Quebec heritage creates an assumption of quality and tradition, but examining the actual ingredients reveals the same industrial shortcuts found across commercial baking. 5. Country Harvest. At number 5, Country Harvest uses imagery of wholesome farming and natural goodness, while delivering a formula heavy with industrial additives. The packaging features wheat fields and rustic fonts, suggesting connection to agricultural traditions, but the ingredient reality diverges sharply. The bread includes wheat gluten and soy lecithin, additives that modify dough behavior during manufacturing. Country Harvest incorporates enzymes and ascorbic acid as dough conditioners, plus lactic acid, creating a chemical toolkit for industrial production. These additives accelerate fermentation, strengthen gluten networks, and standardize results across massive batches. Traditional bakers achieve the same results through starter cultures, time, and technique. For health-conscious older adults drawn to Country Harvest by its wholesome branding, this disconnect between image and ingredients represents a common deception in modern food marketing. The bread isn't Harvest Fresh or Country Simple. It's industrially optimized for shelf stability and production efficiency. When you buy bread that can sit for 2 weeks without molding, you're not getting better bread through better baking. You're getting chemically preserved bread that resists the natural process that would normally signal it's time to bake fresh. 4. D'Italiano. Moving into more concerning territory at number 4, D'Italiano wraps industrial bread in Italian heritage, suggesting artisanal quality that the ingredients contradict. The brand uses imagery and naming that evoke Italian baking traditions, where bread is sacred and ingredients are minimal. The formula includes calcium propionate and sorbic acid, those same preservatives extending shelf life beyond what Italian nonnas would recognize as fresh. Traditional Italian bread hardens within a day because it's meant to be eaten fresh or repurposed into dishes designed for day-old bread. The ingredient list shows added sugar, completely contrary to Italian bread philosophy, where the natural sweetness of fermented wheat provides all the flavor needed. The bread includes enzymes and ascorbic acid as dough conditioners, accelerating processes that Italian bakers developed over centuries through patient fermentation. For older Canadians with Italian heritage or those who've traveled to Italy, the contrast between this bread and real Italian bread is stark. The brand name promises Italian quality, but delivers Canadian industrial production with Italian marketing. 3. Pium. At number 3, Pom has been a Quebec household name for generations, creating deep brand loyalty that makes ingredient scrutiny feel almost like betrayal. Many older Francophones remember Pom bread from childhood, associating it with family meals and cultural identity. The ingredient list includes calcium propionate and sorbic acid, the preservative pair that appears repeatedly in commercial breads. These compounds extend shelf life by preventing the natural processes that would normally break down bread. Palm contains added sugar and glucose fructose, sweeteners that have no place in traditional bread but have become standard in North American commercial baking. The sweetness masks the flatness that heavy processing creates, training generations to expect bread to taste slightly sweet. The formula incorporates dough conditioners and emulsifiers, specifically sodium stearoyl 2-lactylate, that modify how dough behaves in industrial equipment. For older kvetchers managing health conditions common with aging, these additives represent cumulative exposure over decades. Nostalgia attached to palm creates an assumption that it's still the same bread from childhood, but commercial bread formulations have shifted dramatically toward longer shelf life and lower production costs. What remains the same is the packaging and brand name. What changed is almost everything inside. 2. Villaggio. Coming in at number 2, Villaggio markets Italian-style bread with packaging, featuring rustic imagery and premium positioning. The brand appears more expensive than basic white bread, creating an assumption of higher quality and simpler ingredients. The ingredient reality reveals sugar and glucose fructose, those sweeteners that traditional Italian bread would never contain. Italian baking philosophy emphasizes bringing out wheat's natural flavors through fermentation and technique, not masking them with added sugars. Villaggio includes calcium propionate and sorbic acid, the same preservative combination found in budget brands despite the premium pricing. The formula contains dough conditioners and emulsifiers, specifically sodium stearoyl 2-lactylate and acetylated tartaric acid esters of mono and diglycerides. These chemical names are difficult to pronounce and impossible to find in traditional Italian bakeries because they serve industrial production rather than artisanal baking. For older adults seeking better quality by paying premium prices, Villaggio represents a disappointing truth about modern food marketing. Higher prices often fund marketing and packaging rather than better ingredients. The Italian styling is purely cosmetic, wrapping the same industrial processes and chemical additives in Mediterranean imagery. 1. Dempster's taking the #1 spot as the Canadian bread brand most in need of your attention. Dempster's combines market dominance with ingredient concerns that matter for daily consumers. This brand occupies massive shelf space in virtually every Canadian grocery store. From coast to coast, many Canadians have been eating Dempster's for decades, with certain varieties becoming kitchen staples across generations. The ingredient list includes calcium propionate, the preservative that extends shelf life by preventing mold and bacterial growth that would naturally occur in real bread. Dempster's also contains sorbic acid, adding a second preservative to ensure even longer shelf stability. This double preservation approach means bread can survive weeks in your pantry, a convenience that comes from preventing the natural life cycle bread would otherwise follow. The formula includes added sugar, sweetening bread that gains nothing nutritionally from this addition. For older Canadians who remember when bread came from local bakeries and was consumed within days, this preservation represents a fundamental shift in what bread means. Fresh bread was meant to be eaten quickly because it was alive with fermentation and natural ingredients. What makes Dempster's particularly significant is its ubiquity. This isn't a niche brand that some Canadians choose. It's the default bread for millions, meaning widespread exposure to preservatives and additives that traditional baking never required. After exposing what's been normalized in Canadian bread aisles, here's the reassuring truth. Not all bread betrays what baking should be. These next 5 brands prove that real bread still exists in Canada, made by bakers who refuse to compromise tradition for convenience. 5. Ace Bakery, starting our better choices at number 5. Ace Bakery brings European artisanal traditions to Canadian tables with genuine commitment to craft. Their sourdough bistro loaf shows what happens when bakers prioritize quality over extended shelf life. The ingredient list features flour, water, rye flours, wheat gluten, salt, cultured wheat flour, yeast, lactic acid, malted barley flour, enzymes, and ascorbic acid as a dough conditioner. While not the absolute simplest formula, notice what's missing: calcium propionate and sorbic acid, those preservatives dominating commercial breads. ACE achieves preservation through cultured wheat flour and sourdough methods. Traditional fermentation creating acids that naturally inhibit spoilage. For older adults seeking better bread without completely abandoning mainstream availability, ACE offers a middle ground. The bread appears in major grocery chains, making it accessible without requiring trips to specialty stores. While ACE includes some modern baking aids like enzymes and ascorbic acid, these support traditional methods rather than replacing them. The absence of synthetic preservatives means this bread won't last weeks in your pantry, which is exactly the point. Real bread ages naturally, and consuming it fresh honors what bread is supposed to be. 4. Dimpfelmeier Bakery. At number 4, Dimpfelmeier represents old-world German baking surviving in modern Canada. This Ontario bakery has been producing traditional European breads since 1956, maintaining standards when other bakers were adopting industrial shortcuts. Their organic rye bread ingredient list contains just 5 items: organic whole rye flour, artesian, spring water, sourdough, organic rye grain, and sea salt. That's it, nothing else. This is what bread looked like for thousands of years before the Industrial Revolution transformed baking from craft to manufacturing. The organic certification ensures the grains were grown without synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. For older adults who remember or long for simpler food, Dimpfelmeier delivers that simplicity authentically. The sourdough starter provides natural preservation and flavor development, creating complex taste through fermentation rather than additives. Traditional German rye bread is dense, hearty, and deeply flavored. Nothing like the soft, sweet commercial breads dominating Canadian shelves. Dimpfelmeier's commitment to traditional methods means shorter shelf life and regional availability, but those limitations actually indicate quality. The artesian spring water and careful grain selection show attention to every ingredient, treating bread as craft rather than commodity. 3. Little Northern Bakehouse, claiming number 3. Little Northern Bakehouse addresses modern dietary concerns while maintaining ingredient integrity. This Vancouver-based company specializes in gluten-free and allergy-friendly breads, proving that accommodation doesn't require compromise. All their products carry non-GMO project verification, ensuring ingredients haven't been genetically modified. For health-conscious consumers avoiding GMOs, this third-party certification provides assurance that store brands with preservatives can't match. Little Northern positions their breads as allergy-friendly, carefully managing production to avoid cross-contamination with common allergens. This matters particularly for older adults who've developed food sensitivities later in life or who are managing multiple dietary restrictions. While gluten-free baking presents technical challenges that sometimes require more ingredients than traditional bread, Little Northern manages this without resorting to the heavy preservation found in conventional brands. For Canadians managing celiac disease, gluten sensitivity, or multiple allergies, finding safe bread often means choosing between dietary compliance and ingredient quality. Little Northern proves you can have both, creating breads that meet dietary needs while avoiding the synthetic preservatives and additives filling commercial options. The non-GMO verification and allergy-friendly positioning demonstrate a company thinking comprehensively about ingredient sourcing and manufacturing practices. 2. Silver Hills Bakery. At number 2, Silver Hills Bakery has been crafting sprouted grain breads in British Columbia since 1989, pioneering methods that optimize nutrition and digestibility. Their ingredient lists feature organic sprouted grains as the foundation, a significant departure from the refined flours dominating commercial breads. Sprouting activates enzymes within the grain that begin breaking down starches and proteins, making nutrients more bioavailable and the bread easier to digest. This ancient technique requires time and careful management, exactly the opposite of industrial baking speed obsession. The organic certification means these grains were grown without synthetic pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizers. For older adults focused on nutrition density and ingredient quality, sprouted grain breads offer advantages that preserved commercial breads can't match. The sprouting process increases vitamin content, particularly B vitamins, while making minerals more absorbable. Silver Hills operates in a peanut and tree nut-free facility, providing safety for consumers managing allergies common in older adults. The breads require refrigeration and have shorter shelf life than preserved commercial options, which is exactly what real bread should do. Bread that needs refrigeration and spoils relatively quickly is bread without synthetic preservation. Silver Hills proves that modern Canadian baking can honor traditional methods while addressing contemporary health awareness. 1. Cobb's Bread. Taking the #1 spot as the absolute best bread choice for Canadians, Cobb's Bread represents a return to what baking should be. Their company FAQ explicitly states that all their breads contain no added preservatives, a commitment that fundamentally changes what bread means. The white loaf is made free of preservatives, dairy, color, and added sugar. This is extraordinary in modern commercial baking. Cobb's achieves this through baking multiple times daily in each location, ensuring bread is genuinely fresh when purchased. For older Canadians who remember neighborhood bakeries and daily fresh bread, Cobb's recreates that experience. The absence of preservatives means this bread must be consumed within days, reconnecting consumers with bread's natural life cycle. You buy it fresh, you eat it fresh, and if you wait too long, it goes stale or molds naturally. The no added sugar commitment matters particularly for older adults managing blood glucose. What makes Cobb's exceptional is their commitment to actual baking as daily craft rather than industrial manufacturing. Finding a Cobb's location requires more effort than grabbing preserved bread during weekly grocery runs. But that effort is rewarded with bread that remembers what bread is supposed to be. There you have it, 10 familiar Canadian bread brands relying on preservatives and additives, plus 5 that prove real bread still exists in this country. Before your next grocery run, remember that longer shelf life comes from chemistry, not quality, and that bread meant to last weeks has departed from what bread was for most of human history. If this changed how you'll look at bread labels, consider sharing it with family and friends who deserve to know what they've been eating. Thanks for watching, and here's to rediscovering real bread.